When you look at history, as veterinarians, we come out and we have a boatload of knowledge, hopefully, of what we can do for our producers and what we can help them make smart decisions as they start looking at pig production. Over time, you're supposed to take that knowledge and gain some experience, and with experience, then hopefully you do have some words of wisdom for them, some thoughts of wisdom. So when I look at wisdom, I think it's knowledge laced with experience. So hopefully I'm going to give you some wisdom today that's based on that experience that I was able to gain. So when I look at pork production, I think we have to put out some basics, and I think they're pretty simple. When you look at it, it's a commodity business. Yeah, there's some niche markets out there, but it's a small portion of our business. And we're in a commodity business, and that's not going to change. When you're looking at a commodity business, all commodity business become very cyclical. It's just the nature of the beast that we deal with. And we're truly today, we've got to get beyond the fact that we're looking at a U.S. industry or a U.S. market. It's an international market, and it directly impacts everything that we're looking at. We're exporting over 25% of our product. As Aaron said, the dollar. Whoever would have thought we would have dealt with the dollar and how much impact it has on what we're doing today. So it is truly an international market. And I'm going to tell everybody, if you're going to play in a commodity business, you better have a low cost of production. That's just the driving fact of it. You can try to get more for your product. You can look at any way to be a better marketer. You can try to hedge better. You can do anything you want. But in the end, you're probably just going to use all those tools to kind of leverage, take out the valleys. In the end, you've got to be a low cost producer. And I think when you look at our business and you look at all the variables and things that can potentially impact us, if you look back, this is information from 2008, and looking at corn prices, you can see that what an unbelievable market we're dealing in. That's our input. That's the number one input that we buy, and it's fluctuated unbelievably over that time period. And it's going to continue to do this. Yeah, we might be in a time period now that we have some lower costs, but it's going to change, and it's going to go back up again, and we have to plan for that, and we have to be prepared for that. But this alone is going to impact the profitability of our industry. And the same thing with soybean meal. If you look at that, same trends, highs, lows, but over time it's going to be up and down, and we just have to plan for that. We have to look for that, and I'm building a case that we cannot, over time, have major changes in our basic philosophy, because costs and our markets are going to change. We have to stick with a basic philosophy. Same thing with lean hogs. If you look back in times 2009, who would have expected that we would have had the influenza scare that we did, and then would have had the impact on our market? And we dealt with PED, as you can see in last year. If anybody could have predicted PED was going to have that impact on the markets, I need to talk to you, because we're going to talk about the Belmont on Saturday, because you've got more information than I have. And I look at high path today. If you think any of the poultry, the feathers people would have been sitting today thinking they're living in that market, unbelievable. So there are these extremes that are going to happen to us and to other people in agriculture. We're going to have to plan for them, and we're just going to have to realize that's part of the business model that we're going to deal with moving forward. This one I really enjoy, because this is just really estimated returns Farrow to finish here in Iowa back through 2005. And as you can see, it's either good times or bad. And we tend to endure them. We go through some really great times, and great times are always followed by more difficult times. And that's just the fact of a commodity business, and that's not going to change. As you can see now, we're talking about preparing for bad times. We should be preparing for bad times, because we're looking at a market last year that nobody could have dreamt about. You know, we went through a very devastating disease, but in the end, that disease didn't have a negative impact. It might have had a positive impact on the economic outcome of our producers. Our producers are able to weather that, and probably the most profitable year they had with one of the most difficult diseases we've dealt with in a long time. So, but unfortunately, pork producers know one thing to do with profits, and that's to put them right back into more pork. We need to encourage these guys that they need to get out and develop another game plan for their profits, instead of always putting it back into what they know best, which is pork production. But if we don't think expansion is going to happen, we're being very negligent, because that's what producers tend to do with their profits, is put it back into the business. So when I look at the basics, and I'm going to make it pretty simple, but I think that's how we have to start when we're looking at basics. We have three main costs. We've got a weaned pig, we've got a facility cost, and we've got feed cost. There's a bunch of other things that fit into that, and we've got to make sure we understand and know all the cost. But these are the three main components of cost of production. We have to understand them, and we have to be prepared to address them. So when I'm looking at the weaned pig, I think it's a different model. And I don't care if you're completely farrow to finish, or if you're just producing a weaned pig and selling that weaned pig. But this is a different way to look at it, is that in producing a weaned pig, you have a certain amount of expense, that's the numerator, and you're producing pigs. When people like to insult me or insult our industry and say we're a factory farm, yes, we are in a sense a factory. We are creating and producing a widget. The widget only happens to be, in this situation, a piglet. And it's a live biological piglet. And so the denominator in this cost factor is how many pigs we produce. So it's a pretty easy equation. You look at it, if you can reduce expense, increase the number of pigs, that's going to reduce the cost of that pig out the door. I can tell you that history and experience is going to tell me that we can have a much greater impact by increasing the number of pigs, increasing that denominator. That has a much larger impact on the cost of that pig than trying to reduce expenses. Yes, we have to control expenses, but as we get in difficult times, maintaining, controlling good production, making sure that we're putting out the right number of widgets to keep our production system full is much more important than trying to reduce expenses up front. It doesn't work. With a market hog, we have a little bit of a different way of looking at it. We have that same expense, but in this situation, it really doesn't matter on numbers as important as pounds. Pounds is what's going to drive the factor of cost of production. And I think if you look at last year, that's probably a clear indication of why this is in play. Many producers had PED in their systems, lost a percentage of the pigs, and I would say 10% is a very typical number that they lost. But they lost it right up front in a weaned pig where that cost was very minimal. But in the end, what did everybody do last year? They just took their pigs heavier. They just utilized that space that they had with less pigs. They added an additional 20 pounds of pig. It couldn't have been a better time because the markets were paying for that product and packers were wanting that product. So in end, most producers, I'm going to tell you, from what we see, probably sold 3 to 4% less pounds last year with 10% less pigs. And the economics proved that it was one of the greatest years we've ever had. So I think when you start looking at it from a market perspective, it's more pound-driven. In this situation, if we can reduce the expense and increase the number of pounds, then we should reduce and lower our cost of production. So when we look at a weaned pig, I look at it as 4 real key factors that we need to do. We need to produce a 15-pound genetically superior pig. And I think the key, we've seen all the information on what the advantages of that bigger piglet. It's very important, but also genetically superior. Today, there is a difference, and we want to make sure we have the best pig possible. We're looking at making decisions that enhance finishing performance. When I look at a piglet, only decisions I'm making for that piglet is it going to help that piglet perform better in finishing? To me, numbers in the farrowing house are just bragging rights. If you want to talk about I'm doing this in the farrowing house, or I'm weaning this many pigs, or this is all the parameters, that doesn't mean anything. Tell me how that pig is performing in the finishing barn, because that's what's going to provide economic return. So I think it's all the decisions at the farrowing house have to be made toward how is that pig going to perform once it hits the finishing barn. Stabilize health. We want to stabilize health. We want to do that in that weaned piglet. We don't want to have to deal with health issues once that piglet gets out and we put it in a finishing barn. At that point in time, we've got one thing for it to grow, or one thing for it to do: grow efficiently, grow so we can produce that pounds of pork. Then the last thing I think is provide a pig that's very capable of high performance. And I think those decisions that we can do while in the farrowing barn And I think this is something that we're going to learn more and more about as we move forward. There are certain decisions that we can do in a farrowing barn that's going to enhance that performance. Maybe some changes, some new aspects in the farrowing house that are going to help us. Do we wean multiple times a week, or do we wean once a week? If we can fill a wean to finish barn or a nursery very quickly, many advantages. Does it create some issues at the farrowing space? Absolutely. But it also creates some real advantages at the finishing site. Do we cross-foster as much as we used to? We know there's some health advantages if we leave that piglet with its own mother. Are we doing some things at the farrowing house that might have a negative impact on how that pig performs later in life? I think those are all things that we'll continue to look at as we look at really avenues to reduce cost of production, enhance performance, gives us some great opportunities. When I look at the third thing I talked about, facility, it's a fixed cost. It's not going to change whether you're leasing it or whether you're paying for it. When it's depreciated, that's great. You're not making a payment, but you better be fixing on it because depreciation is real. That's just a fact of life, and things wear out over time. And so once they're paid for, it's time to start fixing on it. But I think one of the things that we look at as we get in difficult economic times, everybody likes the idea of what can we do to reduce facility cost. Can we overstock? Can we cut down on space? Do we double stock? Do we use some different techniques to potentially reduce cost? And I think as we're entering a different phase of pork production, we have to really ask ourselves some questions. Should we, and is this the right thing to do as we start looking at the industry? When we start looking at animal well-being, when we start looking at performance, we start looking at efficiencies, I think we have to be very critical and stop and say, yes, these things do reduce cost, but it probably has some other underlying effects that we should really consider as we start looking forward. If we have a barn set up for 1,000 pigs and we start putting way more pigs than that in there, it could have some negative effects as far as animal behavior and other things that we should keep in mind. Feed, it is the majority of the cost, but when it comes down to feed, we can try outsmart the market, and I can stand up here and talk to you about risk management strategies and all those things. I'm not most bankers get really nervous when I talk to a group about marketing, because I think risk management is wonderful. It certainly takes away the valleys. It should help you from getting in those lows as lows. I will tell you, risk management takes away the highs, unless you're way smarter than the industry. And so risk management is a tool to level out the playing field, but unless you're better than the average, you're not going to win. And so it still comes down to you got to be a low-cost producer, and that, in my mind, is producing the best pig possible and let somebody else worry about the markets. But a different subject. But to me, we've got to produce a pig that can convert, and that's what it comes down to feed. Yeah, I'd like to buy feed cheaper, but more than that, I want to have a healthy pig that takes that feed and converts it into pounds of pork. So I think a plan that you can do to develop the healthiest pig, a pig that's going to follow through and convert that highest cost that you have, which is your feed, into pork. That's the game. And I'm going to tell you that never sacrifice performance for a small upfront cost. And when we get in and start talking about what we can do in economic times, and we start looking at herd health plans, I will tell you that our herd health plans moving forward in difficult economic times are not going to vary at all from what we've done in the past. It can't, because I think that is such a small cost. I know Aaron's going to talk about what percentage and look at the costs. It's such a small cost that why would you ever sacrifice performance moving forward when you're looking at creating that animal that I think then is going to perform well in finishing. So I think when I look at goals in today's market, and some of these I think obviously are dictated by feed costs, I look at several things. Number one, a $30 to $32 weaned pig. In today's world, I think about a $17.50 for a facility cost, $80 feed cost to take that weaned pig from 15 pounds to $290 to $295. And we've got to be looking at, as an industry, we've got to be at 95% full value market pigs. That's pigs that are placed in nursery or weaned to finish and that are sold at full value pigs. It's going to be really hard for us to defend as an industry that we are really truly taking care of animals and providing the best care for them if we're losing 10, 12, 15% of those pigs throughout the growing phase. And besides that, this is the most important thing that you can do to reduce cost. It's that denominator. It's increasing the number of pigs that you're selling or the number of pounds that you're selling. So I think 95% full value, 1.85 wean to finish efficiencies, and then, 1.85 gain, and a 2.45 feed efficiency in those pigs wean to finish. And if you ask me and say, wow, that's a pipe dream, that's really some lofty goals, I can tell you that throughout our system, this has been a norm for the last 3 years. 95% is not a pipe dream. It's very attainable if you put the right pig into wean to finish. And the performance of that pig, if it's the right pig and you've done everything setting it up properly, is going to perform well. One of the specifics, I guess, from our herd health, we try to keep it basic. Don't use anything that you don't have a reason for using, but then go with it and stay with the plan. These particular pigs we decided about 5 years ago that in our area in Iowa that we needed to vaccinate for PRRS. That was a totally different mindset for us because we weren't doing all of our finishing pigs. So all these pigs would receive mycoplasma, circle vaccine, and PRRS vaccine, and we will not deviate from that in any way. We don't have to dose anything, and we aren't going to do anything to change that philosophy. Good times, bad times, moving forward. And I think the performance of that pig justifies it. So I think, to me, it's pretty simple. Build a solid herd health plan, and you need to have herd health stability. I mean, if you have an unstable sow farm, you're going to have unstable pigs going through finishing. So develop a herd health plan based on solid immunity. How you get that immunity, whether you're using different plans, including vaccine, is very important as we move forward. And then I think it has to be very basic, as I said, but thorough. Address what you need and make sure that you have that in play. If at some point in time you realize you no longer need to use that plan, then change it. You have to be willing to take something away. If that problem doesn't exist anymore, then take it away. And then I think it's sort of like a marriage, it's for better and worse. For better or worse, there's certainly times that my lovely wife of 39 years and I haven't seen everything eye to eye, but I'm certainly glad that through the good times and the bad times, we've stuck with the things that have made our marriage successful. And I think that's no different than when we look at pork production. We got to stick with the plan that made us successful and move forward. So in good times and bad, for better, for worse, stick with the plan, and it's going to probably reward you.